my pastor's wife, Bridget, came back there and I was crying and she said, Jen, what's the matter? And so I'm, blubbering, crying, and I'm telling her what happened. And I'm like, and I feel like God spoke to me that I'm going to be a pastor's wife. And of course, she's like, oh, that's exciting. And, great. And I'm like, no. And the church was so small. This is so silly to say now. But I remember telling her, like, I see what you do. I don't want that.
Right.
I see what you have to do. And I still remember, she said, Jen, whatever God has called you to do, he's going to equip you. He's going to prepare you and he's going to help you, whatever he's called you to do.
Fall short, but I am sure there'll never be anyone like you. You're strong like your father. Even when you were scared, when I was in trouble, you never left me there. And you love like your mother, like there's nothing to lose. You're an unsung hero, so I sing this song for you.
Are you in need of a passport in a hurry? Look no further. Global Passport Express is here to help. With our efficient and reliable services, we can process your passport in as quick as 7 days. That's right, just 7 days. And that's not all. We specialize in visas for many countries, including popular destinations like China, India, and so much more. Whether you're planning a family vacation, a business trip, or your next mission trip, Global Passport Express is your one-stop solution for all your passport and visa needs. So why wait? Reach out to us today at 210-375-7525 to speak with one of our friendly and knowledgeable representatives. They will guide you through the process and answer any questions you may have. You can also visit our website at www.globalpassportexpress.com for more information and to start your application online. It's quick, easy, and convenient. Mention this ad and receive 10% off any of our services. Don't let time constraints hold you back from your travel dreams. Trust Global Passport Express to deliver your passport fast, hassle-free, and with a smile. Global Passport Express, your passport and visa experts. Get ready to explore the world.
Everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Unsung Heroes. I am your host, Rianne Haff, and I'm happy you can be here to join us. Today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Jenny Leavitt, and she is with us, joining us from Sanford, Florida. So say hi to the audience, Miss Jenny. So we've known Myron, and unfortunately Myron isn't able to be here at the beginning, but we're hoping to get him to hop on at the end. But I'm excited to have Jenny with us today. We've known her and her husband, Pastor Myron, for years. And a little fun fact is Myron was actually the guy who prayed with my husband at the altar when he was in the military and they were stationed in Jacksonville, Florida. He had gone to church, and it was Myron who actually went up with him and prayed with him all those years ago. And I believe Nick said you guys were doing a new converts class or new believers class, and he was a part of that. So their history goes way back. So we're very thankful for you.
Way back, yeah. That would have been the early 90s.
It was, 1995. I think he said Jacksonville was maybe around 40, 50, 60 people around that time. And it just happened to be a time where things were really just popping at the base there, and people were coming in, and it was just a really good time.
It was. We were having a revival on the Navy base at that time.
Yeah, that base isn't even open anymore, is it?
Well, one of them is closed. There were two in the area. One is closed, but one's still open.
Yeah. I'd like to get my kids out there to see where Dad got saved. Well, for those of you who don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself and just kind of tell us a little bit about where you are, the city you're in, how long you've been there, and just a few things God's doing there for you guys.
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Jenny Leavitt. My husband is Pastor Myron Leavitt. We are out of the Jacksonville, Florida church, and Pastor Ron Meyer is our pastor. And we were sent out of Jacksonville into Sanford, Florida in 2017. So then we moved here in 2018. So we've been here 6 years now.
Sanford's just outside of Orlando, right?
It is just north of Orlando.
Do you like it there?
I do. It took a little bit to adjust, and I'll tell you one of the biggest reasons why, and it's kind of funny. Before we moved here, we owned an acre of land out in the country for several years. And it's funny because it took me a while to get used to country life because I was raised in the city in Jacksonville. But then when we moved down here, it took me a little while to get back to city life.
Right. You're a Florida girl, though, aren't you? Born and raised Florida, aren't you?
Not born. We moved here when I was a baby. But Myron always tells me I should just tell people I'm from here.
From Florida. My kids, they were born in Texas. We moved here when they were little, but yeah, they're proud Texans. So where exactly did you grow up then? What was it like? How you grew up, and what was your family and your home life like?
Well, I was born in Massachusetts, but we moved to Florida because my dad was active duty military. And then when he got out of the military, he got a job on the Navy base in Jacksonville. And that's when we moved there, and I was raised there. And that's actually where I met Myron. He jokes around that he outreached to his wife because him and our really good friend, he's also the assistant pastor in the Jacksonville church now, Pastor Meyer's oldest son, Jeremy. Myron and Jeremy knocked on our door when I was living at home because I was a teenager. I would have been 16 at the time. And they were just letting us know that they were doing a little concert in the neighborhood park that night. And I went and I loved it. And I've been part of this awesome fellowship ever since.
Well, we also have a special guest with us. Jenny brought Pastor Myron Leavitt, her husband, with her. And so I would like to ask you, Myron, just if you could tell us why Miss Jenny is an unsung hero to you and to your ministry, because we all see the pastors at conference and behind the pulpit and ministering, but there's often just, the family that's behind him is the one that's carrying a lot of the load, especially when you're out pioneering, you're out, there's no one else. And so you see the sacrifices that she's made, leaving family and friends to go out to follow the calling that God has put on both of your lives. But without a faithful wife, the husband can't go. And so how has Jenny been an unsung hero to you in your ministry and your life over the years?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that she has great taste in men.
Well, praise God for that.
Yes. So I don't know if she told you the story about how we actually met. Did she tell you about
she did.
She tell you the unfiltered version, though, because she likes to doctor it up and make it like all Jesus and stuff, but it was her seeing me rap. Knocked her off her feet. And then in the same concert, she saw me play Rocky. And so it was like immediate, like, I was like, please leave me alone, lady. So.
Wow, you really did miss the whole part of her testimony, didn't you?
So anyway, I know that most people would say, my wife is very faithful and she's always there. She's always been behind our ministry, and it's absolutely true. There is no way that I could do what I do without her help. And it's not just the fact that she's willing to go, and it's not just the fact that she's willing to serve kind of quietly in the background, but with all of the background and all of the difficulties that she's had to face, and she's always just been that solid rock and holding on to her faith and willing to give to others when honestly, she really probably needed people to be giving to her. And so always giving, always willing to help. And, it's like teaching Sunday school on Sunday mornings when she would rather be, in the service and listening to, the message or, helping people there. It's every Sunday, she's doing Sunday school. And when she's not doing that, she's helping, getting, nurseries aligned and working constantly behind the scene with women and helping them get locked in and established in the church. And then you have the factor from home where, again, honestly, there's no way I could do what she's done at home. I mean, and I didn't hear the testimony, but the things that she had to do after the accident with Caleb, and is absolutely admire her for her steadfastness and willingness to serve, and again, always just there to be a help, and she gets to love me, and so that's a big plus as well. So it's not like our marriage doesn't have its ups and downs and rocky spots from time to time, but one thing I know that we'll always work it out. We'll always be able to, come back to a spot where we say, you know what, this is ridiculous. Why are we upset about this? And we work it out and, go forward, and God's always good. So there's so many other great qualities, but you gave me a very limited time limit, which
take as much time as you need, Pastor Myron.
You said I had unlimited time in 2 to 3 minutes. So, no, I'm so grateful for a godly wife and somebody who's willing to always forgive and move forward. There's been so many opportunities where she could have just been like, I'm done with people. As you well know, and probably every person who listens to this, the opportunities that we have to, make excuses and not forgive people and wear our hurt and our brokenness on our sleeve. But we have to pick it up and move forward, and she's always able to do that. So
we both complement each other very well, because she did have really, really great things to say about you as well, and just your strength and steadfastness through very difficult and dark times. So you both complement each other very well.
Yeah. And I tell people this all the time. We would never have been able to make it through the death of Jacob had it not been that God allowed us to go through some very difficult times ahead of that. And, it's one of those things, like, God knew it was coming, so he helped prepare us. And we had to go through some very difficult storms in life to get there. But had he not prepared us, and as we were going through those difficult times, we were like, what is going on? Why is this happening? And then later on in life, we realized he does. He's always got a plan.
Right.
Got a plan.
Right. Well, I told Jenny earlier, I'm thankful for both of you. And she said she doesn't see you guys as spiritual giants, but honestly, you are. You are to me and Nick, and just your faithfulness. Even years ago, I had shared with the audience early on just our kind of personal connection with you guys. You prayed with my husband when he was a drunk Marine stumbling in church. You were the one, willing to take that mess on, and and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful, just that even through your and your wife's own difficulties, you still were at church that day. You still showed up that day. You still had a heart to want to do things. And I'm thankful for that as well. Yeah. So, but we appreciate you guys.
For our friendship with you. So with you guys. So, we count you guys as one of our best friends. So we really appreciate you guys.
Well, I think you do owe Nick at least a Wednesday night service, because this goes back to the Bengals smashing your team, and like they always do. And you said you would come preach. I'm just saying. Yeah. I know it's our turn to come to Florida, but
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I will contact Mr. Haff immediately and get that in the book.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Now, did you have any type of religious background, or was that kind of your first experience with like a Pentecostal church?
Yes to both. So I was raised Catholic. My mom and dad, when they went to get married, my mom had been raised Baptist, and the Baptist minister wouldn't marry them because my dad was Catholic, and the Catholic priest wouldn't marry them because my mom was Baptist. So my mom converted to Catholicism in name. So growing up, I was mostly raised Catholic, but when my dad was out of town, she'd haul us off to the Baptist church. And I remember thinking that it's like different gods, because the way the church services were so different. And when I was around 13, so I had an older sister. She passed away last year, but so my sister would have been about 15 or 16 at the time. I don't really know why, but my parents said, you guys are old enough. If you don't want to go anymore, you don't have to go. And we quit going because we hated it. It was so boring, and you had to sit completely still. A lot of it you couldn't understand. And so when I was about 13, I quit going completely. And then that same older sister gave her life to Christ in an in-home Bible study that she went to. And she spent about a year witnessing to me. And it was just so foreign to what I had been raised believing. And I wouldn't tell her that I was really looking into some of the things that she was telling me. And I was looking up some of the scriptures about there's only one mediator between God and man, and that's Christ Jesus. That was totally contrary to what we'd been taught about how we had to go to the priest and we had to do confession and just lots of things like that she was sharing with me. But more than anything, I started to see a real radical difference in her life and in her best friend's life. They quit the partying. They quit just the revolving door of boyfriends. They quit a lot of the stuff and just started making some really radical decisions. And so, to make a long story short, over the span of that year, I started listening to her. And just on my bed one night, it was March 27th, 1991. I remember just laying in my bed, and I was a teenager at the time, and just saying, God, I don't know if what she's saying is true, but if it is, then I need you to forgive me. I don't have any kind of relationship with you. And if it's true and you're real, I ask you to forgive me. And that simple prayer, it wasn't anything fancy, but there's no other way to describe it. But laying on that bed, I knew that I was forgiven. I just knew it. And I could sense him with me in that room, forgiving me. And that was a radical shift in my life. And without ever going and hearing a sermon on it or anything, I've always loved music, and I started getting rid of music that was vulgar and bad, and I never heard a sermon on it. I'm convinced that was just God's Holy Spirit starting to reveal some things to me. Right. And I spent and you got to remember at this point, and at this point, she had moved away. She went out of state for college. And so, I didn't have anything, no direction, no discipleship, anything. So I spent almost a year praying, asking God, I don't really know what I'm looking for, but I just know I can't go back to the churches that I was raised in, because I had never heard the message of salvation. I had never heard that God loves me and wants to have a relationship with me. As a matter of fact, it was the opposite when I was raised. It was more God's distant. As a matter of fact, he's so distant, he might even be angry with me. That's why you have to pray to the saints. Mm-hmm. That's why you have to get the priest to forgive you, to hope that you get on his good side and that your good outweighs your bad so you can go to heaven one day. So this was such a radical shift in my thinking, and I just started to really devour the Bible. I don't know how to describe it. When I've talked to other people before that they've maybe tried to pick up the Bible before they had a relationship with Christ, and it didn't make sense, or they didn't get anything out of it. And that's how it was for me. But after I prayed that simple prayer, it's like the words just became alive and really meaningful to me. And so anyway, I started praying, and within a year, that's when they knocked on my door and said, "Hey, we're having a concert, in the back of our neighborhood, the back of your neighborhood. You want to come?" And I went that night, and I was like, oh, the church
This
was
is what I'm looking for. Right.
super small at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Meyer and his wife and their 5 kids and a couple of other people, super small. But I remember thinking, these are people who are doing something with what they say they believe. They're not just saying it and then they go out, and live crazy. Like, they're out here actually trying to do something with their faith and what they believe.
Right.
And I loved it. We kind of joke over the years that the little skit they did was a little kind of corny Rocky Balboa skit, but I loved it. Which is just proof that even those little things that we do for God, God can use them, and
right. When you
them.
have this Holy Spirit in you, it's like, because that's the same church. When I came in Chula Vista, it was the pastor, his family, and like one teenage girl and one older woman. But yeah, everything, like the song service was the pastor's wife with the guitar. That was it. And man, I'd be weeping during worship, because I wanted to be closer to Jesus. So when I was singing those words, like, it didn't matter that there was no one else, but, just the guitar and a couple kids, because I was saved. But back to your sister, I'm sorry that you lost your sister.
Thank you.
That's a difficult thing. This actually June will be 20 years that my sister passed away. And it's just, it's crazy to me. 20 years has passed by, but that's a hard thing. Was that your only sibling that you had?
She was. Yep. And she was only 54. She passed away from cancer. So, yep. And my mom passed away just a few years ago. So now, out of the 4 of us that moved here in the early 1980s, it's just my dad and I, that are left. So he still lives up in Jacksonville. So I get to see him still, and I talk to him frequently. So
good. Yeah. So in your childhood, teen years, was there anything that like impacted you to make you kind of turn away from the whole, like, growing up Catholic and be like, I want something else? Like, was there like a pivotal moment or anything like spiritually that you can look back on and say, that was God? Even though I wasn't living for him, that was God.
So part of my growing up years that can be hard to talk about, but I think it's worth talking about, and I think a lot of people who are listening to this would benefit, was my mom was an alcoholic and did a couple stints in rehab. She did finally overcome it, stop, whatever you want to call it, when I was probably in middle school after they separated for a year. And so it was the year that I was in like 7th and 8th grade. And that was extremely hard for me. Honestly, I look back now, and that's right around the time that I quit going to the Catholic Church. And me and my sister, both of us, just had a really hard time that year. And my dad has actually told me since then that the main reason why he moved back at that time was for my sister and I, because we just were not doing well. And I mean, they were married for 50 something years before she passed away, but it was just all really rocky. They didn't have Christ. And so growing up, I just had a lot of areas that were broken. And the Catholic Church didn't fix any of it. It didn't offer any solutions. As a matter of fact, it made it, I think that's one reason why I quit going when he said that I could, when my father said that I could, was because whether I realized it or not, subconsciously, I think I just realized we are really, really broken, and I don't know what can help us, but that's not helping us.
Right. Were you able to, as you became a Christian and get older, kind of repair some of those things with your mom?
I was, and I will tell you, people who pray for their family members, don't give up. Don't give up, because I can tell you, when I first gave my life to Christ as a teenager, for the first several years, I was just gung ho, and I was convinced that God was going to save our mom and dad right off the bat. And I remember being really bold and witnessing to both of them, and it did not go over well. And I can laugh about it now, but as a teenager, I was living under their roof, so
Right.
there was a time when my dad just about forbid me to go. He was convinced that there was a cult, and eventually, obviously, he got over that, and he figured out that it's not. And then my mom was just convinced that because she had prayed a prayer at a Baptist church when she was 3 or 4, that she was okay. And I remember having a conversation with her, more of like an argument, but along the lines of, I have seen you get drunk out of your mind and do things that we won't repeat, but yet you think you're still right with Christ from something you did when you were 3, that you only are telling me about this because your
Right.
family never told you, like you don't even remember it. And so, in the beginning, initially, it did not go over well. And it took years and years and years of just talking with my mom. And sometimes I just had to back off and just pray for her and pray that God would send other people, along her way. And I really, our son Caleb and I have especially talked about this, some conversations that we have with her, that I know that our God is faithful, and I really think that she was saved. My dad, I'm still praying for, and if anybody who's listening can continue to help me to pray for him, I would greatly appreciate it.
Amen.
So he hasn't gone anywhere, not even to a Catholic church in, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 years. He is a lot more open, and, we do have some good talks. So I'd appreciate the prayers.
What's his name?
His name is Rick.
All right, podcast family, Rick. He needs to get
please.
saved.
Please.
Well, let's jump back to so Myron and Pastor Jeremy. They had come and witnessed to you. So you came out to the church and you really liked it. And so How did that look? Did you immediately just jump in like, this is what I'm going to do? Or how did your beginning of becoming a disciple in the church go?
I did. As a matter of fact, Myron and I both separately, obviously, because we didn't know each other at the time, but we both, once we gave our lives to Christ, it was like we settled it, and that was it. We surrendered and we jumped in wholeheartedly. And, we didn't realize that we were in the midst of a wave of God's Spirit just moving in our area in the time that we got saved. You mentioned earlier about your husband. It was all in that same span of time that there was just an influx of people like us that were younger, that when they gave their life to Christ, that was it. It was like settled, and they were on fire, to the point where when you're in the middle of a wave, a movement of God like that, sometimes you don't recognize it for what it is until it kind of starts to peter off a little bit. And I mean, every service, people were coming and getting saved. Every service we would have this, they were coming and getting saved. And, it just was what we did. We just loved God. I think right off the bat, and to this day, I'm just so grateful that Pastor Meyer and his family just really welcomed me and welcomed all of us. We were a bunch of young folk that just brought all of our baggage with us.
Right.
They just loved on us and gave us opportunities to rise up and to serve and to be a part of what God was doing there, in the different ministries and stuff. I still remember the first time I was thinking about this when I was cleaning our little church, we recently had a revival here. And I was thinking back to way back when I first got saved, and the first time that I asked if I could help clean up after service, and Pastor Meyer was like, you can vacuum the stage. And I remember being like, I get to vacuum the stage.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
So,
It was such a privilege to be like, this is my church. Like, it's your church. Man, just pray God, give us those converts and those times again, because
yes.
I think you realize when you go out to Pioneer, like, wow, we were having revival in the mother church, give us that here.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, Jenny, obviously I know a lot of your story, but I'm going to assume a lot of the listeners don't. So if you want to just start diving into, you get into the church, you're entering into ministry. We said earlier, obviously you ended up marrying Pastor Myron, but how did that look, your courtship and getting married, and when you both began to feel there's a call on our life to go out and pastor and pioneer, and how that kind of started to play out in your early days, and what was going on in your life during that time?
Well, like I said, he likes to joke to people that he outreached to his wife. And he also likes to joke that, like, I fell in love with him at first sight. But that's not the case. We were very good friends first. He was I already talked about how small the church was. So he was my drama leader. He was my cleanup leader. He was my base outreach leader. And there was a little team of us little young people that we just did a lot of that stuff together. So we really got to know each other better, spent a lot of time together because of that. And so, the friendship just kind of evolved over time. And I'm really, really grateful that we had that time of friendship, to kind of get to know each other better, and not just, but serving in ministries alongside each other too. I'm really grateful for that.
And he's like 100 years older than you too, right? So he had to wait for you to turn 18, right?
He is 4 years older than me. And yes, we did date when I was a senior in high school, and he did have to wait till I turned 18. So I remember my pastor's wife, Bridget, telling me, Jen, not everybody can get married young. You just wanting me to make sure I thought it through, and everything. But we just celebrated our 30th anniversary last December.
Oh, so, congratulations.
Yeah, God has been faithful. And I know I just gave my age away, but that's okay.
That's okay. Our 29th is going to be in January, and I still tell people I'm 30. So that's girl math, and it works.
Yeah.
So okay. So you guys, begin to date and get married. And so, fast forward a little, how did you two begin to work together as a married couple in the church and decide you want to do a little bit more?
So, let me back up just a little bit. Before Myron and I were dating, there was a church service, and it was an evening, probably a Sunday evening. And all I remember was that it was a movie, and I think it was, somebody would probably remember who's been around for a little bit, but a movie about different missionaries that go overseas. Two of them go overseas, but one of them stays here in America. And at the end of it, it says something to the effect of, there's a need everywhere. Who will go? And I remember going up to the altar, and at that point, I was a senior in high school, maybe the fall of my senior year, because Myron and I started dating in January of my senior year, and we weren't dating at this time. And but I had a full ride scholarship to Florida State University all lined up, and I would have been the first one in my family to go. So there was a lot of pressure to go. God dealt with me that night. I went up to the altar, and I had already kind of been wrestling with God, feeling like there was something that he wanted for my life. But honestly, I didn't really pray about that because I was so scared of upsetting the family dynamic and not going to FSU with that scholarship, that I look back now and I really didn't earnestly pray about it until that night when I was at the altar. And I was just so convicted. And I said, okay, God, whatever you have for my life, I give everything over to you. So if you don't want me to take that, then I need to know, and I want to do your will. And when I said those words, there was such a peace that I had just laid it down and said, okay, I'm just going to settle it right now, whatever your will is. And that little still small voice, I felt like it spoke to me. Now, you got to remember, Myron and I weren't even dating. And I think at that point, I didn't really even like him in that way. But that still small voice spoke to me and said that he was going to use me in a pastor's wife role. And I didn't really want that, to be honest with you. And I remember going back in the nursery after the service, and the church was so small, there was nobody back there. And my pastor's wife, Bridget, came back there, and I was crying. And she said, Jen, what's the matter? And so I'm, blubbering, crying, and I'm telling her what happened. And I'm like, and I feel like God spoke to me that I'm going to be a pastor's wife. And of course, she's like, oh, that's exciting. And, great. And I'm like, no. And the church was so small. This is so silly to say now. But I remember telling her, like, I see what you do. I don't want that.
Right.
I see what you have to do. And I still remember, she said, Jen, whatever God has called you to do, he's going to equip you. He's going to prepare you, and he's going to help you, whatever he's called you to do. And it's not going to be overnight. He's going to prepare you. And I was like, okay, all right. So I don't have to try to figure this out on my own. I don't have to be a perfect pastor's wife or anything like that. And I have remembered those words and held on to those words so many times over the years, not just about a pastor's wife, but about anything that God calls us to do. He's going to prepare us. He's not just going to be like, there you go. I'm wanting
figure it out. Yeah.
Figure it out. You're on your own.
Right.
And, so when we were getting serious, when we were dating, we had an honest conversation about that. Myron was feeling called, and, so I was on board with it by that time. And I was like, whatever God wants us to do. So needless to say, we were only married, probably a month, and we were door directors.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Right.
I look back now and I'm like, my goodness, I don't know
You
what
just get thrown right into the dumpster fire, huh?
Yep. Yeah.
It prepares you though for things. I think it prepares you sometimes.
I would not trade. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, that everybody that goes out should be door directors, because you learn things there. The little details that when you get out there, you know better how to handle all those things that make a church function.
Right. So what did your first couple of years of marriage look like? How long were you guys married before you went out to pioneer your first church, and what was going on in your lives during that time?
So we got married in December of 93. The first church that we got sent out to was in Palatka, Florida, and that was in 96. And in the interim, I would love to say that it was all wonderful, but we both came from broken homes, and we both had a lot of baggage that we brought into the marriage. And we both had a lot of things that we had to work through, and, be willing to let God work in us, and then be willing to talk to each other about it. So that's been a long journey. You've got to, when you get married, it is two people, selfish people with baggage and preconceived ideas and all kinds of things that have to come together and learn how to live in the same house, how to do their finances together, all those things. And then you have a child. We had our oldest son, Caleb, in that time. And number one, I didn't have any brothers, so I didn't have any boy references. And then Caleb was so strong-willed, just like his dad. So then you also have the parenting aspect of the way he was raised and the way I was raised. So there was a lot of conflicts, but we both loved Jesus. And, if when you have Jesus at the center, he will always help bring you back together to each other if you keep him first.
Right.
You know, if you keep him knit tight in that relationship, as that what is it called? The threefold cord.
It's not easily broken.
You know, that
Right.
if you just keep him bound in your marriage relationship, and just keep recentering yourself on him, he'll help you with all those things.
Right.
You know, Myron has told people before that, you know, maybe they spent 20 years messing up their life in addictions or bad relationships or whatever, that we have to allow God time to help us work through those things that took 20 years. God's not a genie where he's just going to be like, that's it. Okay. You know, it's all cleaned up now. You know,
Right.
sometimes it's a daily laying down things at the foot of Christ and allowing him to help us day by day. You know, and sometimes it's looking back and being like, you know what? I haven't had to battle with that in a while. God's helped me with that, and I didn't even realize it.
Right. So I know, Jenny, you began to have some health issues pretty early on in your life. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that and just kind of where you were, if you were out pastoring or back in the mother church at that time, and just kind of what that looked like for you guys as a pretty young family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was actually both. We were out pastoring and we went back in.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't know it at the time, but so that church that we were pastoring, I was pregnant with our youngest son by this time. So we had Caleb when we first got sent out, and then I got pregnant with Jacob while we were pastoring that first church. And so we were in the middle of trying to transition where we were going back home to the mother church, and the couple that was the assistant in the mother church were going to come and take over our church in Palatka. And I was 9 months pregnant. We moved on November 1st, and Jacob was born November 25th. So we had just moved. I was 9 months pregnant, and that couple decided that they were not going to take it over. They were moving back to Arizona. It felt devastating to me because the church wasn't very big, but we did have people coming. And with it being such last minute, we had to make the decision to contact each one of them and shut the church down and just encourage them to find, you know, other Bible believing churches. Little did we know that I had cancer and the pastor's wife who was going to take over had cancer. When we moved back and I had Jacob, I started really experiencing odd symptoms that I hadn't had after I had Caleb. So initially they were saying, oh, it's just postpartum issues. But then it just started getting really alarming. And it was things that it's like, this is not postpartum. Passing out, having excruciating headaches. My eyes started dilating really weird. One would get really big while the other was small, and they would switch. And every time I would lay flat, like the pressure on my head was just immense. Just things like that. And then I started not to be able to breathe very well. I couldn't even walk down to the mailbox without just wheezing for air. And then the kicker, because they still just kept kind of blowing me off. But on Caleb's third birthday, which was March 3rd of 98, we were going to get ready to go to Chuck E. Cheese for his birthday. And I was in the bathroom and my eyes were yellow. Mm-hmm. And the next morning they were really yellow, and they quarantined me and ran a bunch of tests. And I think that was when they really started taking it seriously. And initially they just thought it was but they thought it was pancreatic cancer. So they had me scheduled to get the tumor out. And in the interim, it was only a couple weeks maybe. In the interim, the symptoms just got worse and worse and worse. And the wheezing of like I just got where I couldn't even breathe. And they finally just did a simple chest x-ray. And my chest was full of tumors. I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So all the lymph nodes that were in my chest, it was just full of it. And the one that was in my pancreas was actually one that had metastasized. So I had stage 4 cancer and I didn't even know it.
How old were you at this time?
22.
Wow.
Yeah.
And young babies at home.
Yeah, with a young baby who was just a few months old, and then a 3-year-old. And the doctor who actually diagnosed it, I'm so grateful to this day that he was comfortable telling me. He said, Miss Leavitt, I have never treated somebody as young as you with cancer. I would feel much more comfortable sending you over to Gainesville, where they have a world-renowned cancer institute. I'm to this day, I'm so grateful for that, because the doctor that I was connected with, it has been phenomenal. And I'm just very grateful for everything, how God orchestrated even that. And as a side note, that pastor's wife did not make it. They were only back home, I'm guessing maybe 6 months or so before she passed away from the cancer. And either one of us, if we had been in the town that we were pastoring,
you wouldn't have received the treatment.
That town did not have a hospital. I was already going to have to go to another neighboring city to have Jacob, because they didn't even have a birthing hospital. So who knows if either one of us would have had access to anything that we needed.
So how were you feeling at that time? Just that's young, and then being a new mom with really young, a toddler and a newborn. How were you feeling? Was there a fear that came on you, or were you at that time still just feeling like, okay, it's going to be all right, or did it just descend on you?
Well, there was definitely a real threat that I wouldn't survive. I was hospitalized. I had chemo and radiation. I was hospitalized several times with the chemo. And there was one time in particular where I didn't know this at the time. I didn't find out till later, but the doctors called Myron out to the hallway and basically told him, we don't think she's going to survive. You need to get a hold of family. And Myron said, that's not an option. You do what you need to do. You're the medical professional, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to pray and we're going to believe God, to heal her. And I just knew that he came in and prayed for me. And my husband is a big, strong man's man guy. And to see him get teary-eyed, I didn't know at the time that whole conversation had just happened. But I remember thinking, okay, I'll fight this, because he said something to the effect of, I need you to fight, Jenny. I need you to fight this. And, and I did. To me, it wasn't so much about me physically or even spiritually. I truly believed that God had saved me as a teenager. And I knew that if my time was up and I did die, that I was forgiven and that I was going to make heaven my home. So that wasn't my mind battle. My mind battle was about Myron and the boys.
Right.
Myron would have only been 26 because I was 22. So he was still young. We had a 3-year-old and a baby. And my mind battle was, God, the boys, how is Myron going to raise 2 young boys on his own? How is this even going to happen? And just the enemy of our souls loves to hit us where there's the chinks. And looking back, I can see that was a battle for me, just trusting God in that area. But that was just the mind assault that I was, for months, I battled that. And I remember one night I went out in the living room, and it was the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep because this whole mental thing was just raging through my mind. The boys, what's Myron going to do? How is he going to survive? How is he going to do this? Just all these things. And I remember I said, God, I am not leaving this living room until you give me peace about this, because I cannot keep going on like this. I can't. I just can't. it's bad enough. I feel like I'm physically fighting for my life. I can't keep doing this mentally too.
Right.
And I don't know how long. I mean, it could have been an hour. I don't know. But I wrestled with God in prayer about that. And the only way I can describe what happened is that scripture that says that peace that passes all understanding will come on you. It was like a blanket of peace just settled on me. And like God spoke to me and said, they were mine before they were yours. And I love them more than you do, Jenny. If I call you home, I'm going to take care of them. And it was assurance on so many levels that I personally am in Christ's hands. But the very thing that I'm anxious and fearful about, my own children, they're in Christ's hands too. And then as a mom, you know how much we love our children. Just the thought that God would assure me that he loves them even more than I do, it's just unfathomable. But it's what he knew I needed to hear. And it did. It settled it in my heart. The enemy was never able to lob those darts back in my mind again because that settled it.
So how long did that journey, that trial and struggle last for you? What did that look like? Because obviously, thankfully, you're here.
Yeah. Pretty much all of 1998. I've told people that I feel like I missed Jacob's entire first year because, I had 6 months of chemo and then 56 radiation treatments. And then some handful of surgeries.
Wow. Did you say 56?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
I had cancer and had to be radiated in 4 different fields. So, I mean, it really is truly a miracle that I'm here and that I'm here this many years later. I can only give God all the credit. Really.
Right. That's intense. That is intense treatment.
Yeah.
And so after that year of 1998, what did it look like? Did they say you're cancer free? Did they say we're going to have to keep treating you? How did that particular situation kind of come to a close in your life?
Yeah. They officially declared me in remission. I still follow up yearly with that oncologist, with the radiation oncologist. I don't follow with the medical oncologist, but she told me, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, that at the 30-year mark, they can say that I'm cancer free, which blows my mind that it takes that long. But yeah, so I was declared in remission, and I will tell you that anybody who has faced any kind of way where you might have died, because I've talked to other people, even if it wasn't cancer, maybe it was an accident you survived or, something else. If you faced your own mortality, pretty much everybody I've ever talked to, it gives you a brand new perspective on life and what's really important and what's not important. And, I don't know, I had a renewed sense of like, I really want to make this life count. And I know that God's not done with me and Myron and our family. And, we still had a desire to, be in ministry. And so the following year in 99, we went back out and officially we took over a church, but there was just a couple of people there. But, and I just loved it. I loved being able to do something for God again, because for a while there, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I was going to survive it or not,
So during that time, how were things with you and Myron? Do you feel your marriage also came under assault, or do you feel like you both were really strong together, or was it kind of like, because you were still so young in your marriage, did it kind of, was that a difficult season, or you feel it brought you closer together?
I can tell you that Myron has been with me every step of the way. And I don't know how I would have survived this journey through the cancer all those years ago. And all the scares that have come since then.
Right.
Because he has, he's been with me through it all. And, when people make those vows about sickness and in health and rich and in poor and everything, we're a very sarcastic, fun-loving family. So sometimes we tease that, he didn't know what he was really getting when he said those vows.
Oh, gee.
But he has, he's been with me through it all. And, I'm just extremely grateful. I don't know what I would have done, without him in my life through all of these health scares.
Thank God for that.
Yeah.
So you get through that, thankfully, and you kind of get back on your feet. You're able to kind of jump back into just full-time motherhood and going out to pastor. And so tell me about the rest of your 20s, because there's so much to your story. So tell me about just the rest of your 20s and kind of, where you were heading into your 20s and 30s.
Mm-hmm. So we pastored that church for 2 or 3 years, and then we went back to our mother church on staff as assistants for about a year. And then there was a whole stretch of years where we were over the children's church youth ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my goodness, those were some really good years. We've always loved working with the young people. And at that point in our lives, we just kind of settled it that wherever God wanted to put us, we would just serve him there for however long we were in that season. And at that point, unfortunately, the children's ministry had been through a lot of leaders and they needed some stability. And we were willing to say, you know what? I mean, we're here. We'll be here. And we had revival. We still have great relationships with those kids. And those kids, it blows my mind. They're married and having kids of their own now. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so grateful for that time. And there was a whole stretch of lots of years right after the cancer that I didn't have any health scares. Everything was great for, I don't know, probably at least 10 years that, I didn't really have any major health issues or anything. And, we were just serving God in our local church there and loving it. We were able to raise our boys there. And as a side note, I was talking with a friend, this was a few years ago. She had some things going on in her life that she was confiding in me about the timing and that she was having a really hard time trusting God with the timing of everything that was going on. And it had to do with her husband's calling and her kids and what it would do to her kids and that kind of thing. And I remember telling her this. I can't jump ahead because we haven't talked about the accident yet. So I'll have to get back to that one. But something to the effect of, without giving away too much, that I am so grateful for that season of our life because I really feel like God did some great things even in our boys during that season where they got to grow in their own ministry involvement and in their own relationship with Christ. That I'm eternally grateful for now. And I was just trying to encourage her that sometimes we just have to go with it. If God has placed us there, that there's a reason for it, and that we may not see that reason now. We may not see that reason until eternity.
Right.
But if we've prayed about it and we are earnestly trying to seek God and do his will, he's going to work all that out.
Right. So you get through 10 years of just good health and, just good times in the church. And then what shifted again for you?
It was the start of health issues. I honestly can't even tell you what the first surgery that I had after that, because it just snowballed where I had so many surgeries back to back to back to back to back. And honestly, it's been like that for about 10 years now. And but till the most recent surgery I just had 6 weeks ago. And other than one of the surgeries being related to a car accident that I was in where I was rear-ended real bad, everything else is somehow related to the radiation.
I was going to ask that if all of these, the radiation saved your life, but is this the consequences of the radiation, all of the surgeries?
Yeah. Our youngest son, Jacob, asked me after one of the surgeries, I don't remember which one, but he asked me, he's like, Mom, I just don't understand. Why would they treat cancer with something that causes cancer?
Cancer, right.
And I remember telling him, I mean, Jacob, I had a 25% survival chance. So the fact that I'm here, like sometimes you have to weigh out, yes, I do have long-term side effects, but what if I hadn't done them? I don't know. I don't know if I would have survived or not. And as a side note, we did seek counsel with our pastor and we all prayed and fasted before I went through those treatments. It's not like I'm just trying to encourage everybody to just, make sure that you've really talked to your spouse about it and get some family input. But, and I remember telling Jacob, but at least I'm here. And, but yeah, like this most recent surgery that I had, part of it was my esophagus and my diaphragm. And when they went in there, they were only able to do about half of what they needed to do because the esophagus is just not strong enough. The testing that they did, it's not functioning very well. And that was all in the area that was radiated.
Right.
So, the doctors even said, I think the very first thing to go was my thyroid. And they said that was conclusively from the radiation because it's one of the first things that goes. It doesn't handle radiation well. So yeah, just a lot of chemotherapy hits your fast growing cells. That's why people lose their hair, their nails get brittle,
right.
Their skin gets dry because those are all fast growing cells. So that's why it hits it fast and hard. But the radiation is more of your long term, slow,
right.
So it'll creep back up later.
So how old were your boys now during this time when everything kind of started kicking back up and you were having to go and have procedures done and different things? How old were they and how were they processing seeing Mom kind of go through this? Because I'm sure they didn't remember the early days, the first, round of cancer.
Caleb did. When he was in elementary school. Just about every year in elementary school, I tried to have a private conversation with the teacher, and especially before, because at that point, I would have still been going every 6 months, not every year. And, I still had to get annual scans and, tests and stuff like that. And so I always tried to keep the teachers in the loop because he would act up or act out or like they could notice that something was off with him. So that's hard as a parent when you're trying to balance how much you tell a little child so that you don't make them worried. But they do know that Mom's not there and, and so, yeah, by the time stuff started really like where I had to go get a lot of surgeries and stuff, they were like upper elementary, junior high age. So they were definitely old enough to start understanding more. And like I said, it wasn't long after that Jacob was like, I just don't understand. Why?
Right.
Why? But he didn't remember any of it. So he wouldn't have had any idea to know how serious it had been.
And you guys were still in the Jacksonville church at this time, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So what year was that then when that all kind of, is that late 2000s then?
I think that the first the thyroid surgery was 2013. I could be wrong, but I think that's about right. It was about 2013. It might have been 2011 or 12, but somewhere around there.
So you've already up to this point just had a lot of battles. You've had to fight a lot of, I'm sure, moments where you were just like, maybe not, I don't know, but just like, God, why? Like, why is this happening? Why is this going on? And just a lot of probably fear, I would assume, because I don't know, that kind of stuff. It takes you, you walk down a road that not everybody walks down. And it can be a very lonely, scary place. But I know we have so much more to your story. There's definitely, as your children began to get older, you and your family, I think, experienced one of the hardest things that any family could ever go through. And, if you're willing, I'd like to ask you some stuff about that in our second half. But right now we're going to save the rest of our conversation for our premium subscribers. And if you'd like to become a premium subscriber, all the links are in the show notes below. Every dollar that comes in through the subscriptions goes to world evangelism. We don't keep a dime. We're able to write a large check to World Evangelism at conference, and it's just a really cool thing to be a part of, and it's a blessing. And I'm just really excited that God's using this to just reach people across the world. So we're going to say goodbye to our regular listeners right now, and thank you so much for joining us. And we will be right back with the second half of Miss Jenny Leavitt's story for our premium subscribers.
You're my unsung hero, and I sing this song for you.
Hi, I'm Mike Ashcraft, pastor currently in Van Nuys, California. Pastor, man of God, your wife left everything to follow you in your dream. Are you going to leave her with nothing? The Bible says, he who doesn't provide for his own is worse than an unbeliever and has denied the faith. As men of God, we're ready to stand before God due to tragedy at any moment's notice. But what about our families? What happens to them if we were to die? There's an easy financial solution so that they don't have to go through poverty or destitution. Call me today, 310-403-6471. That's 310-403-6471.